Welcome back to another episode of Truth, Lies, and Nonsense. And what are we going to talk about today? Well, what's in the news recently, and it's something that's, I guess, dear to me, is the FBI again. We're going to talk about the FBI, and specifically Trump's request for the list of agents that participated in the January 6th investigations. I find that request interesting and not all potentially bad or upsetting. But it seems some of the media outlets and some politicians are outraged by that request. Why? Because the truth might be very bad for some. And as you see today, I'm wearing my FBI raid jacket because I think it's invigorating to put it on and talk about the FBI. I spent 20 years with FBI, and it's near and dear to me. It was my career, my life, loved it. But sadly, as I discussed in previous edition of Truth, Lies, and Nonsense, the FBI's deteriorated, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years. I joined the FBI in 1999, obviously predates 9/11, and it was amazing. 9/11 was tragic for the country, but it was also tragic for the FBI in a way. It changed the mentality within the FBI to something that I think slowly been eating away at it. We'll cover that perhaps in another issue, but what I want to talk about today is Trump's request for a list of the agents that worked on the January 6th investigation. And why is that relevant? What is the Trump administration trying to get at? Well, I think clearly they want to know if anything improper was done by the FBI. And I think, though, for what I'm hoping it does is I'm hoping it exposes how broken the FBI is in its hiring process and how it promotes agents to supervisor. And the process was broken, as I talked about in previous issue, back by Director Mueller when he instituted an 18-month headquarters process and lowered the promotion time in service from 6 years to 3 years. And you go to FBI HQ and get your supervisor tag and then go back out to the field and wreak havoc, basically, which is what happened. So I guess to put it simply, agents during the last 15 years, I say, were hired under a different hiring climate than they were before. Certainly before 9/11, I'd say probably around 2005, 2006 is really when it started to go into full swing, and we started to get agents that were politicized and were of a certain temperament that agents before that were not. Agents used to be hired because they had a calling to uphold the law, to seek out and catch those that broke the law, regardless of political party, religious affiliation, etc. The sad truth is that no longer is the case amongst a significant population of agents these days, and that's sad. I'm going to quickly try to quickly cover 3 examples of problems I experienced while I was in the FBI as an agent with regards to supervisors that should never have been supervisors, and that how that led and can lead to misguided decisions and a yes boss mentality. As I talked about in a previous podcast, it seems to me that in the mid-2000s, agents that were yes boss agents were overwhelmingly promoted to supervisor because they didn't rock the boat. They didn't question they didn't question their supervisor, and therefore it looked like they wouldn't, question the ASACs and the SACs above them if they became a supervisor, which is seemingly what everybody wanted. Nobody wanted conflict, and so that's what it seemed like we got in the Bureau, and that was damaging to the Bureau. So I was in the Sacramento division, and I had just arrived on a transfer from the Washington field office, where I had spent the previous 8 years working terrorism, public corruption, and national security investigations. I was assigned to the public corruption squad, and I wasn't there for very long, and an agent had just arrived back in Sacramento from his 18 months at FBI headquarters. I had about 10 years in at the time. This other agent, he came back with, I think, around 4 years. However, he has a higher pay grade than I did because of his HQ time. You go to HQ and you go from a 13 to a 14. When you go back to the field, you go back to a 13, but you get an increase in your step until you equal the pay you had as a 14, which leapfrogged me. So, that's all fine and dandy. I didn't want to go to headquarters and be a paper pusher. So I didn't really care about the money. That was never a concern of mine. Well, one day this agent, he comes up to me and he asks me how he can get bank records for a person involved in his case. I thought that was a little odd. So I gave him a curt answer. I said, well, get a subpoena. His response was, I thought those were for only getting phone records. He went on to say that couldn't he just tell the bank to provide the records or he'd just go get a subpoena if they didn't. I was frankly flabbergasted. I mean, we learn about subpoenas at the academy. We use them every day in our cases, constantly. How he did not understand how they are used and how to get one, I can't answer that. Well, I did look into him for a little bit. And it turned out that he had never really ran a case of his own, but he'd always been like a co-case on somebody else's case. He was like a perpetual Robin to the Batman. After his probationary period was up, which was 2 years, 2 years after you are hired, your probationary period's up, and you can, then you get the 3 years and you can become put in to be a supervisor at headquarters, which is what he did. He got a position in a terrorism unit. You're thinking, wow, 3-year guy gets a job at a terrorism unit at headquarters. That should scare you. His job was to handle phone data. Don't know the specifics, but probably just collecting phone data for phone calls to and from and all that stuff involving terrorism investigations. Well, during his time there, he seemingly forgot how to be an agent, or he really never paid attention at the academy, or he just has a bad memory. I don't know. I kind of keep my distance from agents that are that bad. Well, 2 years later, this guy went on to get a field desk. God knows how many cases he went on to screw up there. He just was not cut out for the job. But that's the problem with the Bureau that I saw coming along, is those agents that didn't rock the boat, they are good Robins. They just did what Batman said, no questions. They went about their business. They seem to rise through the ranks, and that's a shame. Another FBI 18-monther came back and took over the undercover program. Now, I had been an undercover agent full-time for 3 years, and I understood the program very well. However, again, I didn't want to run the program. I didn't want to be involved with that much paper and bureaucracy. I wanted to be out in the field, running cases, getting sources and stuff like that. So, I didn't fight for that position. Maybe I should have. This agent decided, though, they get there, and to make it easier on themselves, they decided that they'd have all the mail for each undercover ID sent to the same P.O. box, because they didn't want to have to drive to 20 different P.O. boxes to collect the mail. I could go into the problems with that in detail in another podcast involving undercover work in the Bureau and a ton of issues with that. But one of the cases involving an undercover agent who obviously was using an undercover ID, it went to trial, went to court, and needless to say, his alias name, becomes public record. It's testified to, and his address is on his ID. The address he uses as an agent, not as an agent, but as his alias, his fake ID, for lack of a better way to put it, his alias ID, is out there. Well, because all the mail for all the undercover IDs went to the same P.O. box, it wouldn't take that clever of a young defense attorney or anybody of interest if they ran that address for that one UCID. They would have uncovered the alias names for every single undercover agent in the Sacramento division. How do I know this? Because I ran that address and I got every single Sacramento alias ID name. That's a problem. And that's a problem when you have somebody that goes to headquarters with no experience, gets their supervisor ticket, and comes back and has preferential treatment for getting these other positions in a field office. They don't know what they're doing, and they make these kind of mistakes. Another example, and the last example I'll use before I move on to other things, is I was assigned as a co-pilot on our surveillance squad for a short time. And the surveillance squad's called in for, your monthly squad meeting. And at this one squad meeting, our supervisor told the agents that for the past 2 weeks, we were to log that we had worked surveillance on healthcare cases. Meaning that for the last 2 weeks, we had to put on our official time and attendance cards. Those are the cards that we log in, how much time we spent working different kinds of violations, and we submit that, and it goes up to headquarters, and it goes on our records so people can keep track of how much time we're working on different types of cases, whether it's drug cases, terrorism cases, public corruption cases. Anyhow, we were told that all of our hours for 2 weeks were going to be on healthcare. And I saw the agents, they're taking notes, writing it down. And that didn't sit well with me. So I asked SSA, that's Supervisory Special Agent, SSA, why would we do that since we hadn't run a surveillance on any healthcare cases in the last 2 weeks? In fact, we hadn't run any in the last several months. The supervisor said it's because the division needed to get the number of hours worked on healthcare cases up so the division would qualify for additional funding that was available to divisions who met a threshold for working healthcare cases. I think you know where this is going. I explained to the supervisor in front of the squad that that was a violation of FBI policy and could also be a false statement made by the agents when they signed their time and attendance cards. I refused to log it on my car, and I advised the other agents not to do so or do so at their own risk. So it is important to note here that each FBI division reports the number of hours worked on various cases to the FBI headquarters. Those numbers are compiled and reported to Congress. Those numbers are then used to assign funding and investigative priorities. Our supervisor, in collusion with our special agent in charge at the time, and probably our assistant special agent in charge at the time, was basically asking us to falsify statements to Congress. Basically, we would be misleading Congress on what actually was being investigated by the FBI. So I trace all these problems back, as I talked about before, to Director Mueller meddling in the promotion process with FBI. A process that only promotes those that don't rock the boat and never disagree with their supervisor or executive management. I could go on with more examples of how that led to problems with investigations, security, common sense with the FBI, but I want to turn to Trump administration's request for a list of all the agents that worked on the January 6th investigation. My question would be, is it appropriate for the Trump administration to look at the books concerning those who worked the January 6th investigations and how those investigations were handled? I say yes. My experience alone tells me there is more than some truth to the claims that agents might have been following ill-guided or inappropriate investigation, or directions within investigations. This is because of the personality types that have been hired and promoted, as I explained. The FBI has become overstocked with yes-men agents that are too timid to stand up and say no. They're too timid to question what they're being told to do, and that's really leading to problems with the FBI. So is it possible that more than likely there is a percentage of agents who are conducting investigation actions that may be outside the scope of what is allowable? Yes. I think Trump wants to find out how many and who they are and what instructions they were provided, and he should.